Welcome, College Chem. Today we're going to be learning about Rice tables, which are a strategy in order to organize stoichiometry. We will need these again in Unit 7 when we talk about equilibrium. So, a Rice table can be used for limiting reactant problems in order to help organize the information. A Rice table, the acronym stands for reaction, initial, change, and either end or equilibrium. In a Rice table, we can have either concentration or we can have moles. And it really kind of creates some columns to help us organize the information. So here's one of my reactants, what I started with, how it changed, and then what I ended with. And so this can save with some of our labeling. And so we're going to work through a couple example problems. Please make sure to include them in your notebook. So our first one, we have 1.5 moles of aluminum and 3 moles of chlorine gas combined according to the reaction. And then we're trying to find the limiting reactant, how many moles of aluminum chloride are formed, also known as our theoretical yield. And the more difficult question, how many moles of excess remain at the end of the reaction? This is where the Rice table will benefit over our typical stoichiometry or dimensional analysis. So if you notice, I am just pulling my givens from the problem. That's what I initially started with. And when I initially started the reaction, how much of my aluminum chloride did I have? I didn't have any. We haven't made any yet. So in that one, I'm going to put a 0. And then the reaction is going to occur, and it's going to change. So we're going to have a change in the amount. We can't get smaller than 0, so that is actually going to increase. We're going to add some things to there. But where does the matter come from? It's coming from the aluminum and the chlorine reacting. So those are actually going to decrease. And so you will see in our change column, I'm going to have negatives for my reactants and a positive for my products. Now, let's take a look at those numbers. Where did they come from? They came from the chemical reaction. So my change, my number in front of that, is going to come from my coefficients, which is a nice alliteration there. Change coefficients. Then in the end, we're going to figure out how much we have left over of my reactants and my product. So we have some x's, and we're going to have to solve for x. So we do have a little mini algebra problem off to the side. So in order to find x, we're going to focus in on this part of the reaction. So we know with a limiting reactant problem that one of my reactants has to go to 0. We're going to run out of one of them first. If we run out of both of them at the same time, they are perfectly combined. And so what I'm doing for my finding x is I am taking how much I had of my aluminum, and I am subtracting 2x, and I'm setting that equal to 0. That's what I did right here. And I'm going to find that if that is what I run out of first, my x will be 0.75. And I'm doing the same thing for my chlorine. 3 minus 3x, set that equal to 0, and that is 1. Whichever number gives you the smaller x, that's the one you're going to use for your x. So I'm going to cross off the other one, because we cannot use that number. If I used 1, it would give me a negative amount of aluminum in the end, and that would not make sense. We are not going to be dealing with antimatter today. So I'm going to plug in my x values, and I get that my aluminum is what I run out of first. That's my limiting reactant. How much do I have at the end of aluminum chloride? Well, I started with 0, then I'm adding to it, making 2x, x is 0.75, so I'm going to end up with 1.5 moles of aluminum chloride in the end. And then how much of my excess remains at the end? That's this part here. That is how much of my chloride I have at the end. And so this can help organize that. If I had another product, I would tell me for both of them what I am making. And so we can either fill in part or we can fill in all of the table. But this is a technique to help organize it. The next problem is going to help guide you through filling in some before we get into class. Hope this helps.